Hello everybody in Facebook Live land, and welcome to the beautiful Long McQuade Studios here in sunny Pickering. My name is Ray Wilson. I am the National Sales Manager for Yorkville Sound and have been pretty much your friend for the last 3 months, whether it be on live broadcast or email or follow-up phone calls. It's great to connect with you again. I'm glad to be back online. Today we're going to have a lot of fun and maybe even a little controversy. I know there's lots of experienced people that are going to join us today. They always do. And we'll have lots to talk about. So we've done Recording 101 back on April 1st, and thanks to you, we've had over 23,000 views of that particular seminar. And today I want to do a bit of a follow-up to that, although coming up in a couple weeks we have another seminar that's a true follow-up. This one is to satisfy one of the key questions that I get from people, especially my own clients, but also people that want to do what I do. And that is to have a home studio that actually makes some money. Today we're going to talk about the top 10 essentials for a dedicated home studio. And the idea here is that you've already gotten set up from Recording 101, you've got an interface, you've got headphones, you got a microphone, and hopefully you're doing some recording. That's the whole goal. I mean, the pandemic's been kind of cool for that if you've been off. So hopefully you've had a chance to get some stuff down onto the computer and maybe even do some editing. So today what I really want to talk about is how you expand that to include other people, maybe other talented musicians, and maybe even turn this into something that makes some money. Now, I want to put a couple of disclaimers out there before we get started. Everybody by now is, I'm sure, familiar with Billie Eilish, and understanding that almost all of that album was essentially done with those three key components: microphone, headphones, and interface plugged into a MacBook Pro, and a phenomenal engineer in her brother. And they did great work. And end of the day, that is really all you need. What we're going to talk about today are some of the things that you would either add to create an environment that other people would want to work in. None of these pieces of gear we're going to talk about today are going to supplant talent. They're not going to make you better performers, better producer, or things like that. But there are probably some things that you had no idea that most people have, whether it be gear or ways to use gear. So we're going to do some unboxing today. So we got a few, we'll call these unboxing videos. But also, we're going to take a step-by-step approach to, the smart things to add. It doesn't always have to be money-based, but often it turns out to be a piece of gear or something like that. But let's talk about these things. I've got an answer board right in front of me, so any of your questions that we can get to, they're going to come up on the answer board, and I'm going to take some time to answer them right now. And so you can ask them, and I'll go through them with you. And of course, post this, I'll start on Monday to respond to anything that I don't get to today. So hopefully you're ready to go. I've got Matt Durante with me here today. Matt's going to be producing today's video. So big thanks to Matt as always. If I had an applause button, I'd be pressing it right now. He's got one. So that's great. So we're going to get started, and hopefully you're ready to go. So let's start off with the first piece. So probably most of you have, if you're like me, married with a couple kids, and there's usually you're relegated to the basement or some space away from family, because this is your thing to do. That's hopefully not a distraction, right? So I started off with going into the basement and trying to clear some space there, but you find out very quickly the first problem that we're going to talk about today comes from working in environments like the basement, because the walls are usually concrete. There's a floor joists that have areas to capture sound and bump it back out at you, and usually a cement floor. So the first thing I want to talk about, the step one, I guess you could say, is to a dedicated space, is how do you treat that space? And some people don't think that this is all that important, because there's all kinds of post tools that you can use to try to, I guess, eliminate noise and so on. I can tell you that the best recordings are always the ones that have the least amount of noise in them, because every time that you do something artificial to try to remove noise, it's audible. You can try to fix it in the mix, if you will, but at the end of the day, you have to find a way to eliminate that. So we're going to talk quickly about two elements to that, and one is reflective tools, and then the other is isolation tools. So the very first thing I want to show you today is how people manage reflective reflections, room reflections, and that is the sounds that bounce off the walls and come back into your microphone when you're trying to sing or play guitar or whatever the case may be. So the first thing I'm going to show you today is a reflection filter. And the idea with a reflection filter is that this is not an isolation tool. We're going to talk about that momentarily. But a reflection filter, the idea with that is I can put my microphone inside, I can sing into the reflection filter, and this particular one actually has vertical and horizontal reflection properties. So with a microphone inside, what it's really going to do, and I'm sure we probably can't capture this, but in here, this room is relatively dead. There's some room treatment that I'm going to point out momentarily. But what this is going to do is those shimmery sounds that come from, when you sing and the information pops off the wall and back into your mic, this product really dampens a lot of that. It takes away a lot of those reflective sounds. Now, you can buy these things as little as $149 up to, guys like this guy more in the $300 price range. But this is a good and I'll call it inexpensive way to stop reflective sounds from getting back to the mic. So the trick is, if you take this room, for example, if I had like a moving blanket behind me, for example, that would stop reflections behind me, and I took this and put it in front of me, and I had my microphone right here, and I sang into this device, I wouldn't get any type of reflective waves this way. Very little this way because of these ribs coming around this way. And of course, this being curved this way, I wouldn't get much off the roof either. So this does an amazing job of stopping the reflective waves from coming back into the microphone. Now, what it doesn't do is, it doesn't stop anybody who's upstairs saying, hey, you know what, it's time for dinner, or it doesn't stop the compressor and the air conditioner from going off. So that brings us to isolation tools. So people don't really give enough respect to this as being just as important as a microphone or an interface or so on. Having a space that you can dedicate to the studio and actually treating that room with, for example, on the wall here I've got some panels that companies like Auralex and Prime Acoustic will make that not only dampen the reflection but also can, depending on their properties, create a certain amount of resistance. Now, it's not the same as creating a room within a room and having an air gap to prevent sounds from coming outside, and it's definitely not like having a booth where you can separate that from your room and put insulation in the walls, leave some air gap, and so on. That's more what isolation product is all about, and that gets to be a lot more expensive. So, again, stuff you can put on your walls or mobile filters like the ones I just showed you are going to stop standing waves from happening. So the reflection sounds that make a room sound kind of empty or cavernous, it'll prevent a lot of that. But if you really want to make your studio into something that's a dedicated space, there's probably some construction involved. So keep that in mind, that if you nail step 1 of these 10 tips I'm going to give you, you've just totally changed your recording environment in a way that makes tracking external instruments, we should make that clear, because obviously if you're working with samples and there's no live-to-air microphone techniques being used, then this is somewhat of a moot point. Hence the Billie Eilish album, where a lot of it was done just either through direct input or through samples that were created on the laptop. So it was a wicked sounding album and selling too. But that's a somewhat different premise. And if you are a beat maker and someone who works completely in the box with no microphones, obviously the only reason you would need isolation or dampening is for your vocal microphone, because that's pretty hard to reproduce. So hopefully you understand step 1, and that's room treatment. So fire off questions on that at will. The second thing I want to talk to you about is things change a bit the minute that you want to add somebody to the studio. There's different ways for them to listen, but the minute you're collaborating with someone, whether it be an artist that you're producing or engineering, or whether it be just that you want to work with your friend and you're both collaborating on how the mix should sound or whatever, The next step that you're going to have to take is something like a headphone amp. And I'm going to bring that out, and we're going to do an unboxing here, which is pretty cool because a lot of people don't know what this product is. So let's talk about it. The idea with this in its most simple form is that you can plug more sets of headphones in. Now these are not, thousands of dollars. These are a couple hundred at best, depending on whether you need 4 inputs or 6 inputs. So it's a reasonable investment to get you able to collaborate with other people. They could bring their set of headphones in, plug into your headphone amp, and although everybody gets the same mix, it's fine because at least they can control their own volumes. Now what's even really cool about this is they've got things like talkback in it. So if the person that you're working with is in another room, some people even set up their vocal booths in closets and so on, you can actually plug a microphone into this so you can communicate with them via talkback. So let's open it up and let's chat about it a little bit. So this is an ART Head Amp 4 Pro, and I chose it for a couple of reasons. I'll just pull it out and show you that. So this is a Project Series product that's pretty small. I'd say probably 6 inches by 6 inches. And, I'm sure the fam back home here is never going to be happy that I'm opening a brand new package, but don't tell them I won't. So I'm just going to pull this tape off here, if I can get to it, without ripping the package, but I'll probably rip the package. There we are. So this is it. So nice and small. You can see on the front of it here, it's got some headphone volume controls. It's also got, let me just get this right, a microphone input for your talkback option and the volume control for that, and then a standard output for everything. And on the back, you've got room to plug in headphones, whether that be, you can actually get 12 of them in here, but only 6 volume controls. So I'm losing focus a bit here, my apologies. And yeah, there's even a kick switch input on it, so you can put a switch on the floor whenever you want to talk to somebody. You can just kick that on and that puts them involved. So you've got some controls on the front here that if you want to talk to somebody individually, you can even just press this talk button and you can talk to them individually. You can see there's talk buttons across the whole top here, or there's even a talk all button, so you can talk to them with that. Or again, press the foot pedal, have your mic in front of you, and away you go. Even if you got a gooseneck mic to plug into that, put it on your desktop, you'd be able to, it'd be nice and clean. So there's even a listen back option here as well. So 4 volume controls, listen out, talk back, and that's in a Head Amp 4 Pro. That is an inexpensive way to get you to be able to have other people listening in the studio. A great example of that is you have some players that come to your studio and you want to do, say, a vocalist, a guitarist, a bassist, and someone who's playing a percussion product. Now they can all have separate headphones, all with their own volume controls, feeding off of your interface. So really simply done for an inexpensive price. I think this guy's somewhere in the $179 neighborhood. But yeah, that gets you more people involved, which is the next step to either monetizing your studio or at the very least, being able to collaborate. So I've got a couple of questions here. I'm going to address those right now. One from Eric Tran. Can you speak about how to treat a room for recording drums? So I will address drums, but I'm going to speak to the overall scenario of treating a room. If you ever watch any documentaries about places like Sound Studio or other places, Sound Studio's drum room, even though a lot of people did drums at Sound Studio, it was a mistake. It was part of an amp company's room that they basically got lucky. If you listen to Dave Grohl in that documentary, he explains that it just kind of looked like the space to put drums, but there was nothing special about it. The idea with drums is that you still want to keep some life. There's no way to absolutely isolate everything, and you don't really want to, because drums are not just, a tom by itself and a kick by itself and so on. A lot of the sound of drums comes from the properties of the kit together. There were great engineers like Eddie Kramer who used just 2 or even 3 microphones to mic drums. So let me talk about the room. What you would do is, and this is what I did when I did my room, I stood in the center of the floor and I clapped my hands, and you would hear tuck, 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 which is 3 reflections. I would put up certain baffles and I would hear tuck, tuck, which is 2 reflections. I put up some other stuff and I'd hear just 1 reflection back. And for me, that told me I had dampened that room enough. Now, once I mic'd the drums and I heard what the sound from the walls was like, and whether that was enough, to control the drums, I knew I created a happy zone for that. Now, what I actually did was, my room is 3 out of 4 walls closed. So I treated all 4 walls with this type of panel that Matt's got here. These are 2 by 4 or 5, looks like either Auralex or Prime acoustic panels that have a 6-inch gap. And that's exactly what it is in my place, leaving 1/4 of the room active, meaning the wall still had some reflection, and the rest of it treated so that there was limited to no reflection. So there's not one formula for any room. There are measurement tools that you could use if you really wanted to, but your ears do the best job of telling you whether you're getting the response that you want or not. Drums really do need a little more control. However, again, it's how the room sounds after you put up some treatment, and that includes bass traps for the corners and wall treatment for reflections at your ear level. So hopefully that covered that, and you got something out of that. From Shanette Hudson Barrett, in small rooms of 10.5 by 11 feet 4 inches, do you recommend foam bass traps or panels? So there's a lot of debate on this, and when I first started out, when I built a dedicated room in 2005, I put up foam, and I bought I think it was called a London kit, about $1,500, that had some foam bass traps and foam wall coverings and so on. The good thing about foam is that it's relatively inexpensive, it's relatively easy to hang, and it's got a bit of a cozy feel. But I'll tell you, 15 years into it, I'm ready to remove it in my case, because it starts to flake and decompose to some degree. But again, that room sees probably 4 clients a week and varies in temperature and humidity. So it's it is what it is. It does the trick. It stops reflection, but it has no depth to it. In fact, in the ridges, it gets pretty much right back to less than 1/8 of an inch in thickness. So I can still get reflection from that product. Is it good or bad? I loved it at the time because it was inexpensive and super easy to hang. I used an adhesive on the back, and it was up, and it looked real cool too. It did the job, definitely did the job, and you'll find lots of Durham and Toronto artists whose albums were recorded with the foam on the wall, so it does the job. I have found that the acoustic panels with either 1.5 or 2 inches of depth not only gives me the reflective control, but to some degree also cuts out, they're not as transparent, and they take a much thicker insulation in them, so when sounds hit that, they don't go through that, hit the wall, and come back through it. So I personally prefer panels, but there's a cost to those. If you get 8 panels, you're often talking about $800 to $1,000. So keep that in mind, that they do similar jobs, and there's pros and cons to both. Actually, I don't know of any cons to the panels except price, but hopefully that helps you out. If you can go right away to panels and afford that, then always worth it in my opinion. Cool. So that's all I wanted to tell you about head amps. I should actually mention though that they come in 6-channel as well. So if you think that you have a lot of people that you're going to be bringing in, or you want things like extra more me inputs where they can control their own personal input. So if I'm the drummer, I can add more drums to my mix, that type of thing. There's 6-channel ones with those types of options included, and even multiple mixes out. So you can do 2 mixes in case of some of them, like the Presonus HP60 or the ART Head Amp 6 and Head Amp 6 Pro that even have EQ controls on the headphone amp. So that's the next purchase, I think, after you treat your room, is a headphone amp system. Now, you've seen my studio monitor presentation, so I'm going to talk about studio monitors in a few minutes, but I just want to qualify something, that headphones are really the inexpensive way of collaborating with people. They also take away a lot of the, I guess, the concerns for room treatment as far as when you're mixing down. But even in Recording 101, we talk about headphones as being your ultimate mix tool. There's a lot of reasons why they're not the best option. But again, we're not trying to break your bank here. What we're trying to do is now get you to a point where somebody walks into your space and says, you know, I've heard about you. I know you're a talented person. And again, like I said, talent's number one. I know you're a talented person. I'd love to work with you. Just the simple premise of the fact that you both need to hear the stuff means that you're going to need a headphone amp or some sort of splitter or something. A splitter doesn't give you separate volume controls where a headphone amp does. So hopefully that as step 2 is respectable and makes sense that it's the way to go. So far so good? All right. Let's make the assumption that your artist is only has a guitar and they're coming in to record with you. They don't have headphones. So step 3 is you got to have some spare headphones. Now you can buy headphones for $20, $30 even over the head style, semi-open or closed back like we talked about in Recording 101. And they might be all that you're going to need because as a tracking artist, they may not necessarily need the best headphones or the most accurate. But again, like anything, the value that you put into it is the value you'll get out. So I'd always recommend at least a second set of headphones. Now, some people even argue that if you have a pair of ATH M50s, you should have a pair of Beyerdynamics just to get a different reference. And that's cool too. But ideally, it's more about a semi-open or a closed back headphone that you're going to really want. So you'll want the semi-open for the times that you're going to mix with other artists, and you'll want the closed back for if all you want those headphones for is tracking. So spare headphones are always a great idea. Now, I think I brought, did I bring any headphones? I did. I brought some HP 100s today. These are my headphone of choice, and certainly having worked for Sony for a number of years, these were awfully similar to the ones I was working with. So let's crack these ones open too. I'll tell you a few things about these that I love. First of all, I love the fact that they're collapsible. So many of the headphones that you find today are, but getting collapsible headphones with comfort is sometimes tough. So they just fold out just like that. Obviously go straight onto your head. Nice and clean. You know, as you would expect. But here's the cool things that I love. There's the retractable or removable jack on these is a big deal because just to store them, even to be able to just take the cable off and put it away is cool. But more importantly, you can have both a coiled cable and a straight cable. This particular pack actually comes with both. So if you break a set of these, break the cable, you can just get a replacement cable even. But I like straight cables because it doesn't leave a big mess on my desk or try to coil them up in some way. Some people love coiled cables, especially as a drummer. I have a set of coiled cables on my drum kit. So very, very handy. Now I picked these particular ones today because they're around $100, but they're good long wear headphones. And you can be in the studio sometimes for a really, really long time. And having something that's heavy or causes you to sweat is not a good, comfortable headphone to keep. I like these because they're super lightweight and certainly they sound amazing. So if you haven't had a chance to try HP 100s, I would say if you get it into your budget, get a couple pair of these for the studio just in case you have guests that you want to record. And again, if you want to show somebody that you're there to make some money, ideally you're going to have to have some separate headphones. So again, another $100 per pair, maybe get a couple or enough to fill your head amp for. Have them hanging on a wall behind the door, that's what I do. And they're ready to go whenever you're ready to go. So HP 100 is a good way to get there. I also have a pair of ATH M50s that I love to keep around. They're my drum headphone. Not because they're specifically a drum headphone, but because they feel comfortable to me and they stay on my head when I'm uber active. And I also love the sound of them in a mix. So there's lots of good products out there that you can look at, this one being my fave. So number 3, set of spare headphones, ideal and necessary for a collaborative environment in the studio. So again, keep the questions coming. I'm going to move on and talk about a product I didn't bring with me today because I just did a studio monitor seminar. But I do want to touch on that today. So really step 4 is studio monitors. Now, I just talked to you about having headphone amps, and certainly for tracking and recording, you do need some headphones for that. But honestly, if you want people to look at you as a place that they need to come and do their work at, you need to have some studio monitors. Now, do you need to have $10,000 ATCs? I'd like to say yes. However, that's not, until your skill level gets you to that point where your discerning ears can maximize a product like that, no. KRK Rocket 5s are still the top selling studio monitor on the market. Obviously there's Yamahas, there's Yorkvilles, we sell a ton of the YSM 5s, 6s and 8s. But having a set of studio monitors is really the next step in collaborative work. For all the reasons that we talked about in the studio monitor seminar, including things like being able to mix in a room environment where the room is treated and the studio monitors can give you a real spatial sense. So when you're trying to move things within a mix, trying to judge how much reverb you need, try to deal with time delays, basically not only all that, but just have someone in your sound space that can help you make mix decisions. Studio monitors really are the next step. Now, the budget obviously is up to you, but getting yourself something that is meant to be a studio monitor with a certain degree of flat response and accuracy is what you need. A desktop computer speaker, probably not so much, and certainly even a home PA speaker, not so much. Those are meant to be driven and meant to use the environment around it as its delivery point. So studio monitors are definitely a great addition and maybe a critical addition, I would say, to having what you want to call a home studio. In fact, I don't know too many people who would consider your space a home studio without a set of studio monitors. So fire off your comments on that. I'm happy to hear them, of course. So if you want to ask questions about studio monitors, certainly I can help you. I've tried almost everything, but I don't want to show anything today. We just showed them all 2 weeks ago in the seminar then. So maybe even for a much more dedicated session on that, go back and watch it. All these videos, of course, are on the Long McQuade website, and you can refer to them at any time. So in a moment, I'm going to move on to the 5th thing that you're going to need in the studio, but I'm going to answer a question momentarily from Eric. So is that everything, Matt? Is there a way to counteract the imbalance in bass if my mixing desk is in a corner? Well, Matt, that's a great point, because that brings us back partially to room treatment, but it also brings up something that we can touch on, and that's how your workspace creates an issue. So if the minute you put a studio monitor onto a wooden workspace, this workspace becomes a big subwoofer. The vibrations from the studio monitor actually increase the bass response and give you an artificial delivery of how much bass that there is. So you need to decouple those, and I didn't talk about them, Eric, so I'm glad you brought it up. There are actually foam pads. There are little pucks you can buy, ISO pucks or ISO stands, or some even like we carry with a metal plate on the top and a large foam on the bottom. Basically to put your studio monitors on, to decouple them from your desk, and you'll notice the bass response changes tremendously. Now you're talking about your mixed desk being in a corner. The biggest problem you're going to have with that is sound's just going to travel back, come into your corner, and like a big typhoon, spin it around and come back at you in some sort of crazy fashion. So what you would need in a case like that is to treat that corner, whether it be with a bass trap or even with some sort of, if you can hang a curtain in behind or something to decouple what the response out of the back of the speakers is to what's hitting the wall and coming back at you. Corners are our arch nemesis for sure when we're trying to listen to a mix. Having your desk in a corner makes it even tougher, but hey, I get it. These are home studios. If you don't have a dedicated space that you can get your desk out of the corner, then that's all you can do. So put something in the corner, usually a bass trap or a moving blanket behind your desk to make sure that there's some decoupling between the sound from the back of your speaker to the corner. Peter West asks, do both monitors need to be powered? I'm not sure an example where they would not be, except for the ART RM5, where the amplifier is actually built into one speaker and it sends the second half of the amp by a specialized cable to the second speaker. If that's what you're referring to, Peter, that's a unique design. I don't know too many companies that are doing that besides ART, and that's really for more of an installation purpose and the fact that they are a studio monitor first, but they also have some consumer properties like Bluetooth and set up for home theater and listening to music. So that normally, the single amplifier concept is reserved for computer studio monitors or companies that create a monitor that is really more meant for computer audio than studio purposes, but that doesn't mean they don't work. And I've always said in all my seminars, the best piece of gear is the one you already own. So the headphones that come with your telephone, your smartphone, if that's your starting point, that's your starting point. So no harm in that. You'll use that until you outgrow it. And then you'll buy a separate set of dedicated headphones when you see a need to do that. Shanette Hudson Barrett asks, for studio monitors, what's your suggestion for placement? So this is my trick. I know it's a lot of studio people's trick, but it's just one trick. It's not the only rule. So first thing I always do is I measure my distance from where the front of the studio monitor would normally live to my seat position. And that means where my chair normally sits. If I'm reclined like this, that adds another foot. If I sit like this, that's different. But in my mix position, how far is it from my desk, or where I guess my nose or my ears would be, to that first speaker and that first speaker? Let's just assume for a moment it's approximately 5 feet each way. I would then put my studio monitors 5 feet apart, creating an equilateral triangle. Now, the other key piece to that is I then need to make sure that that speaker is on a 60-degree axis, because if I got one tilted wide out and the other one tilted in, it's going to give me a different response again. Really the best way to do any studio monitor setup is, if you want to use the equilateral triangle concept, you can do that. If you don't want to do that, at the very least, sit down and listen to your favorite music and have somebody tilt the speaker until it sounds great to you. Because then once you get into that sweet spot, that's where you're always going to work. Okay? Great question. All right. So although I'm encouraging more questions, please keep bringing them. Let's move on to step 5, which was a massive game changer for me when I first got started out, and that was a preamp. So most interfaces, and I know some of the most popular ones are the ART USB Dual Pre PS, the Focusrite 2i2, the Universal Audio Aero. These are all different levels of 2-channel interfaces. And when I say different levels, the preamps that come in them, they get the job done. Meaning you can get connected to them, typically do podcast, typically do acoustic guitar, vocal, that type of thing. Now, you'll do your recordings on these devices and you'll think it's great. And then you'll go to a friend's place who has a preamp and they did a recording, and you're going to say, wow, how come your recording sounds different than mine or better than mine, is usually what my learn was. And a lot of that had to do with something called clean gain. And clean gain comes from a dedicated device that actually has a preamp stage that has some investment into it. Meaning that when you hit, we'll say 7 out of 10 on the dial, if the preamp has 60 dB of gain, although this is a gradual process and not exacting, theoretically at 70%, I should get 56% of clean gain, 56 dB of clean gain. If I had my preamp that has 32 or 33 dB of gain, by the time I hit 70% of that, I'm talking closer to 22 or 23 dB of gain, which really puts me in a rough spot because I can't make the thing loud enough to really get enough drive from my source, whether it be a vocal, acoustic guitar, electric guitar amp, or whatever. Now, things, you can get inexpensive products like, for example, the Tube MP. We'll open this guy up and have some fun with it, but let me explain the clean gain thing to you again. There are some preamplifiers that you can buy that are $3,000, $4,000, and it doesn't matter if you turn the volume, the input volume up to 10 and turn the output volume up to 10. You won't hear an ounce of hiss. Meanwhile, I'll take my $100 interface, and by the time I get to half or three quarters, I'm already getting hiss. And you're thinking, well, I need to turn it up a little more to really get a good input signal. Well, that's the reality of interfaces, is that's why they're inexpensive, is the preamps that are in them generally they're not clean gain preamps. So they'll get you to a certain level and you'll be fine. But once you really want to get some nice articulate notes or some ghost notes or harmonics of an acoustic guitar, being able to get a level that's good enough and clean enough to do that is tough. So even with a device like this, it's well under $100. I'm going to open this guy up as well. This is called the Tube MP. Now, if you go to a Long McQuade store, you're going to find these things by the dozens inside of their rental departments, because bass players love them. Sorry, I'm going to move this out of the way. Bass players love them because they give them nice clean gain. Their bass drives really hard, and they plug that into their bass amp. So here's a Tube MP Studio, which is only slightly different from a Tube MP in that it has a view meter on it. But a view meter is pretty handy, especially when you're new to the game, because at least it can tell you whether you're clipping or not. So very, very simply put, I'm going to take my glasses off for this. You got 60 dB of pretty clean gain that I can dial up on the input stage. And then I've got another 10 dB of output gain that's also pretty clean, so up to 70 dB of gain input. Now, if I really want to challenge this thing, I can, well, actually, not, that's my total, 70 dB. But I can choose 60 dB by pressing the 20 dB gain button. So whether I need that or not is dependent on the source, of course. I've got just my 48 volt phantom power. Of course, I'm going to need that for my condenser microphones, I'm sorry, and some phase reverse and some other small things, but essentially it's this simple. I plug my source in here, it comes out here. That's it. Nothing fancy, but the one thing I do love about the Tube MP is it's got a tube in it. So again, makes bass players fall in love with it because it rounds off a lot of their attack notes, it gives a little bit more beef, and I'll use the overused word warm is what tube properties give to it. So this is a basic preamplifier, but I'll tell you, it will totally change the quality of your audio interface. Your input sources will come to life. You will be able to gain things up. Things will still stay much quieter than they would normally if you had a standard input source onto your Focusrite 2i2 or your USB dual pre-PS or whatever. So add a preamp, it'll change everything, trust me. Now, of course, you can move up to different preamps, and I'm going to bring out another one of my favorites here momentarily. But you can get preamps that are really dedicated to various uses, and I'm going to grab one right now that's called the Voice Channel, and this is around the $400 price point. The idea with a Voice Channel is it's really great for the podcaster or somebody who's just a vocalist. They're wanting to get the absolute most out of their voice. So let me grab that and we'll unbox that. This I've been waiting for all day. So this is our biggest device, Matt, if you can get that all in the shot. So this is the ART Voice Channel. And the concept with this guy is it's a full-on channel strip. Now it's meant for vocalists, but it can be used for anything. There's two features on it that really make it dedicated to vocalists, and I'm going to bring those features up right now. So why don't we open it up and have some fun here. So it's a standard 2U 19-inch rack mount product. I will move this box here out of the way. Throw the manual in here because we don't read manuals, right? Okay, I'll put that in here. Now, I'm lucky enough to have worked with Scholastic for about 8 years, and that one of the things that the voice talent that comes in tells me is that this is their go-to box. Let me turn this around here. Because it's inexpensive, it's a cult classic. There's in the U.S. the users of this product, we sell these things by the hundreds. Let's talk about why people love it so much. I'm going to try and get this centered here, Matt. Okay, there we go. All right. So first of all, just like any other preamp, if you want to make it nice and simple, there's an input stage. Let me just move this over here. There's an input stage with a gain control. So again, I've got 60 dB of gain, just like I would have on the Tube MP, which is really great. That's clean gain, so lots of power. Now, the next thing I have, which is pretty unique, is when you buy a microphone, like when you start to get into mics that actually are more than, say, $300, you can actually, they'll tell you what the best impedance to set that microphone or your preamp for to get the most out of that mic. Now, I don't know anybody who isn't a tweaker when you're into this stuff. So being able to take a U87 that's in the 2.2K, I believe it is where they say it works best. You're supposed to dial this to here to get the most out of it. But actually changing the load changes the properties of the mic. So sometimes you're darkening it up, sometimes you're brightening it up, but essentially you're changing the I guess you could say the resistance of the signal going to the capacitor or to the microphone. So very, very handy feature if you want to try and change the tone of some of your mic products. Now, this is, again, if you're Adele, you can't live without this type of thing. And I know she uses a 6176, but this, and that's of course with a compressor built into it and an EQ for that matter. This compressor section is really, really super cool. Standard threshold, ratio, and attack and release. But what's really neat is there's a de-esser built in. So if you want to get rid of some of the sibilance, this is the way to do it. This device is the only preamp that we have that has this function built in, and it really, really works. Now, you can try to dial the frequency, be able to listen to your artist and move this around depending on what their vocal frequency that they normally live in would be. But then you can control the amount of it here with this de-esser control. So that certainly is a vocal function that's unique to this device. So moving on, I'm not going to spend all day on this, but I do want to show you that there's a full EQ with 2 sweepable bands as well. So if I again want to alter the tone of my artist's voice, maybe they're a bit nasally and maybe I need to draw a little bit of 2.5K where that nasal lives in the mid-range. I want to just go into here and grab that 2.5K. I can't see where I'm at, but say about there, and then maybe just bring it down 3 or 4 dB. I can do that. So having a full EQ on here along with the compressor is pretty impressive for a preamp this size or this style. But what I really love about this piece, aside from all that metering and all that stuff, is it's actually an audio interface too. So if you don't have an interface, this basically connects in with USB to your computer, and you've got full control over your sample rate and your bit rate. So you can select if you're a 16-bit 44.1 person, that's on here somewhere. I think it's in around here. I can't even see it in here, but there's 24-bit 44.1, which is where a lot of people still like to live. But you can set that up and then set your DAW up to match it and you're good to go. No need to have a separate interface at all. So if you're a voiceover talent, that's why these things are so good, is that you can just plug them in and plug your mic in and done. Now, it doesn't mean you can't do the same thing with an acoustic guitar or whatever, or even just plug this unit's output into your preamp. You can definitely do all that stuff. So, and then here's just your output stage. So your input stage, compressor, EQ, output stage, and then your connection to the computer. So very full featured in a 2U rack mount unit. And that's a next level preamp that is going to change how things are done. So great question here from Thomas Victorio. How does one connect a preamp to an audio interface? I'm going to show you that right now. So on the back of here, there's not a ton of functions, but there's a few things that I'll point out. A few different connections you can have. So to answer your question, you just plug the output straight into your input on your interface. That's simple. So if you, now what you would want to do is, because your interface is also a preamp, you're going to want to keep that level relatively low so that you're not introducing the tone of the preamp in your interface as much as you're introducing the tone of this device. Now, some interfaces have a SPDIF output or a digital output that you can plug this guy straight to that input, and you're not even using up the preamps. So certainly PreSonus makes a lot of gear like that where they have SPDIF inputs or optical inputs if you want to be able to plug single output it here into your in through optical. You can do that too. But basically, it's whatever output your input your interface has, you just plug the output from your preamp to get into your interface. Hopefully that answers your question, Thomas. All right, so Bruce Murray says, and I'm still going to say it online, even though it doesn't look like it's a good start. My tube MP was pretty noisy right out of the box. I was told that they are hit and miss depending on the tube that you get. Was recommended that I invest in a upgraded tube. Okay, so I'm going to try to make a relationship of this to automobiles. I can tell you that when I bought any car I've ever bought, the tires that came with it got me from A to B, and they are great when I want to drive. But in the wintertime, they're not so great, so I buy dedicated tires to improve my car's driving in the wintertime. Or maybe I buy high performance tires that have very, very low profile that feel like I'm tighter and hugging the road. The tube, the 12AX7, that comes with almost all of our gear is about as stock a tube as they get. And they're the go-to tube. They work. They last a long time. A lot of people will even just put that into their gear. But it is a basic stock tube. You can buy Russian tubes. You can buy German tubes. You can buy antique tubes. And they will all slightly alter the tone because the circuit changes. So adding a different tube will change the tone, whether that's preferred or not, whether that tube is properly biased or not. There's a lot of properties that will do it. But I will say this, ART gear is one of the most modded products in the world because the architecture of the gear is so good and so easy to work with. They're kind of like the PC, I guess you could say, of the audio world, where people will put all kinds of different things into them, try different things, and because they start out really good and the architecture is good, changing things like tubes or even op amps or output amps or things like that, you can do that in the ART world without a lot of complex circuitry. So great point. I would have just simply exchanged the unit. They're not so hit and miss. I mean, we sell them by the hundreds. So, you might pick one up in rentals that might have something, like anything, I guess, out of the box, sometimes you can have a problem. I hope you returned that and just got another one. Recommending a different tube, you probably met up with a person in the store who's done this before, and they got a good response from that. So by all means, that's not going to make, if this thing was noisy, I don't think the tube would probably change all that. It might have been just that particular unit wasn't. It maybe barely passed spec or something, I'm not sure. But that's too bad. I'm sorry you had that experience, and hopefully you got a new one. All right, so we talked quite a bit about preamps, but I'll tell you, I work with professionals that have one preamp, and that's all they'll ever need. Personally, I have 16 because I want different flavors for different scenarios and different circumstances. I do a lot of drum tracking, so I like specific preamps for kicks, separate ones for snares, separate ones for toms. In fact, there's so many pre's out there, it's hard to tell. But it's not my recommendation to say that you should get 8 different flavors of pre because you can't make your studio work without it, but you should get a pre because you will notice a difference to the sound from your stock pre's built into your interface immediately. So, ideally that would make a nice difference to get a preamp. All right, so we are about halfway through. Hopefully you're all still with me. Awesome. So let's get down to some of the stuff that you think, I never thought of this stuff before. But it all makes sense, and it all will be pieces that, if you have a Long McQuade account especially, this is how your account grows, because these are the $50 and $100 things at a time that you start picking up that you think, okay, well, I'm pretty happy with how everything's going, but without these things, it's again hard to collaborate with other people. The worst thing is, you get a second set of headphones, you got no place to plug it, or you get another microphone, you got no place to plug it. So if you really want to be credible as a collaborative artist, you got to have certain things on the ready. And these next 5 things are things that none of them are probably over $100, but you got to have them. So let's move on to number 6 and let's talk about spare microphones. So today I was going to bring a drum kit pack, a pack of microphones and stuff like that, but I'm not going to bore you with that. I'm just going to talk to you about a couple of essential things that you got to have in mics. Not that you need 3 dozen of them, but things that you may even probably own, but why they make sense. Now, I talked about a lot of this stuff in Recording 101, but I think it's worth reiterating because this is probably the biggest question I get from novice people is, I got an SM58 or I got an Apex 381. Doesn't that cover everything? Can't I just record anything? And the answer is yes. You can record anything you ever need to record with an SM58 or an Apex 381. And then you'll go to your friend's house and you'll hear that their acoustic guitar sounds transparent, the reverbs come off really nice, and it's not as face forward, and you're going to say, man, my 380 doesn't sound like that, or my 58 doesn't sound like that. Well, that's because it's a dynamic mic that has different properties and principles than a condenser mic. So let's just talk about those for a moment. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on mics, but this is my number 1 question from novices, why they would need more than 1 microphone. So let's talk about it. And let's go this direction. So I've got 3 I'm going to line up on the desk here, and we're going to unbox them all to the regret of everybody at Yorkville, that you can get B stock product now at a great price. So let's talk about dynamic microphones. So I honestly believe that whether it be the SM58 or the Apex 381, which are really very similar microphones, this is the top rented microphone. This microphone it's durable, robust, and like I say, generally the go-to guy you got to have. And this is what it is. This is meant to be a live microphone, really. That's its intended purpose. It's quiet when you handle it, so if you're going to hold it in your hand and sing, it's quiet. You just plug a regular XLR cable into the base of it, plug that in the front of your interface, and you're off and running. Now, why I still say it's the best microphone to own is that whether you're going to use it for live or recording, there's probably 75% of all the things you want to record you could probably do with a dynamic microphone. And that includes people with robust voices, guitar amplifiers, keyboard amps, toms, things like that are loud sources that dynamic mics can work well with. But here's the big difference with this product. So first of all, you need to have a lot of gain, or more gain than a condenser microphone, to make this thing perform well. So suddenly we're back to the preamps not having enough gain to make the microphones perform well. So then you got to get your preamp just to get this thing to work. Now, some people say, a cloud lifter or some other device that is an inline preamplifier will do the trick, and they're right. That preamplifier has no volume control, but that's the clean gain that you need to get this mic to perform properly. So yeah, for sure, live, use these all day and all night. Even in the studio to some degree for vocals and again for loud sources, you got to have a dynamic mic. Now there's a one that looks more like an SM57 that if I take this ball off of it, it looks a little bit more like that. And essentially they're pretty much the same microphone. But the idea with that is that I've got this windscreen that I put on top that suddenly turns it into a vocal microphone. So don't let them fool you on that. They are really the same microphone and do the same job. We call ours the Apex 775, and that's your instrument microphone. So you got dynamic mics for instrument, dynamic mics for vocals. This is something you should have, and they sell for less than $100. So yes, folks, that mic that you already own can be used in the studio. But you go and put this in front of an instrument that you really, you spend a lot of money on a good quality instrument, whether it be a violin or a cello or a Gibson acoustic or whatever, and you want to record the subtle nuances of that instrument, this is not the right product for that. Let's talk about what is. Now, in all my Recording 101 seminars, you will always see me use the black version of this microphone, the Apex 435. This is the red version of it. I love this mic because everybody asks about it when I do the seminars. Where did you get a red microphone? We still carry them, I believe. I don't know that we carry a lot in stock at any given time, but it was an anniversary edition. So let's unbox it. I'm going to take it out of the case. Push this to the side here. All right. So it comes with a shock mount, and it comes with a big pop filter that you can just put on top of the microphone. I don't know if you can see that or not, but anyway, you get the point. And of course the microphone. Now, all of my Recording 101s across Canada that I teach, I use this mic. And there's never a case where somebody who's new to recording does not have a mind-blowing experience with it, because they can't believe that a mic that's $100 can sound this good. Now, your AT2020s and so many other products in this price range also sound quite good. The concept with this mic is it's meant to pick up everything from here to here, 180 degrees from when I put it in front of my face, but it also picks up the very, very subtle nuances of my voice. It also picks up the room tone, which is a part of the sound that I may or may not want. If I'm doing a presentation like this, I don't want any room noise. But if I'm doing a situation where, I'm Christine McVie and I did my piano solo at Berkeley Auditorium in 1977, I'm dating myself here, of course, having a condenser mic in that auditorium to pick up all the beautiful tones of the auditorium, or having this mic inside of a piano itself and picking up the way that the chamber of the piano sounds, that's what this mic is for. So yes, you need a condenser microphone in I believe every circumstance. It's great to have a dynamic, but the minute you add a condenser to your recording situation, changes everything. So even if you start off with something relatively inexpensive, I can promise you it'll be a game changer from your handheld dynamic. So yes, you need to have another one of these. Now I'm going to suggest to you that you need a few of each. And the concept of that is, if you're starting to record other instruments, you're going to find that things like guitar amps, for example, even though they blurt out a pretty hefty tone, and the mic changes are not necessarily going to create massive difference in tones. There are some mics that are really do a good job of high sound pressure level outputs, and mostly those are dynamic mics. But an SM7B comes to mind, or a D7 from ART. These mics are meant to handle 80, 90, 100, 110 dB SPL. This microphone, as much as it can handle pretty hard sound pressure levels, it's really meant to handle the nuanced tones. So at the very least, you gotta have a dynamic, you gotta have a condenser, and as your mic locker grows, you're gonna get to learn that different mics give you a different sound. There isn't really one mic out there that you say, okay, the way that sounds to me is a way that mic picked it up exactly the way it sounds to me, because the room comes into play, the noise environment outside comes into play. A lot of things come into play, and even if you go into a totally dead room, you could say that the microphone's picking up just what it hears. To some degree, that is true. Change the polar pattern, it changes again. So this is a single polar pattern. It's just cardioid pattern versus a figure eight or an omnidirectional setup. But yeah, get a condenser, have that in your mic locker, and over time, you're just going to add to them. I almost never sell a microphone, because if I've had success with it, I keep it for those scenarios. I keep a Shure KSM 44 often for strong female vocals. It seems it does do a great job, or gang vocals where there's 3 or 4 people singing into it. Again, a handy mic for that scenario. So hopefully that made sense. I'm going to answer a couple questions, and then I'm going to go on to pencil condensers in just a moment here. So Bob Galati, do you find those sponge pop filters muddy up vocals? I'm assuming you're asking an opinion, and my opinion is not gospel. It's just my opinion. I never ever use them. I do find that they dampen the tone of a vocal. I always use a pop filter, and we're going to talk about those later on, and that's an external device that goes in front of it because there's different surfaces you can use that can change that. This closely assimilates a cloth-style pop filter, but the fact that it's right in front of the diaphragm, I just find that either I have to deliver a bit more of a stronger vocal, or I find myself trying to overcome it a bit with brightness. So I share your sentiment. That doesn't mean I'm right, but I do share your sentiment. Now, Evelino Braganza asks, what's the function of the shock mount? All right, great question. Sometimes you get ahead of yourself and forget that not everybody is on the same page and at the same level. So let's talk about that. So in its most simple form, this is the mount to connect to the microphone stand. So it connects on the stand like that, and your microphone sits inside. But I want to show you, although this one has lost the elastics from it, I'll put them back on, that when I hold this shock mount like this, watch what I'm doing inside. I'll try to keep my hands out of the way. You see the microphone can move inside. So that means that anybody that hits the mic stand, kicks it, or any vibrations from the floor, or any bass that's traveling along hard surfaces, that sound doesn't travel up your mic stand and go into your microphone because it gets absorbed by these little elastic bands. And I'll see if I can show you this way. I can press the elastic band down, and you can see that allows this center portion to move freely. So almost every condenser microphone will come with a shock mount, and if it doesn't, you should get one for it. It'll change the bass response of the microphone and certainly eliminate any unwanted vibration. So hopefully that answers your question. All right, Kirk Weber asks, what are the differences between the Apex 381 and the SM58? Well, Kirk, I want to tell you the truth, but there's a lot of government and politics involved in that. I'm kidding you, but functionally, nothing. They are a very, very similar diaphragm. I'll leave it at that. They have really the same diameter ball on the top. In fact, if you buy the Ball 58 from Shure, it threads right onto the Apex 381. Those that use live microphones professionally will say that it's really just a proximity thing in that they, some people like to slobber all over their mics, and they like the way that the SM58 manages that slobber. But more people will say that the Apex 381, it's a slightly different voicing. So I really like the fact that it's a little more airy in that, I can get close to it and it really picks up the, almost my inspiration breath, because the mid-high frequencies are just really enjoyable. So it's a personal preference. It's not the Apex 381 is about $30 cheaper. That also matters, and comes with the cable as well. So that's a really cool thing. But 9 times out of 10, people will tell you that they don't know or hear a difference between the Apex 381 and the SM58. So hopefully that answers your question. Cool. I'm going to box this one back up, and we are going to move on to the third mic I want to show you. Now, as a drummer, I've always had a pair of condenser mics. These guys I love, but I'm going to tell you why I love this particular bundle, besides the fact we distribute it. This is a kind of product, again, you need to have them kicking around in the studio. And here's a few uses that probably most of you who are using them have them for. Drum overheads is maybe the #1 reason. Acoustic guitars are #2, if not 1A. Room tone, so you want to get out in front of your kit, or you want to pick up some of the room tone of the resonance from your amplifier. Pencil condensers fit nicely into small spaces. They pick up pretty much everything that a standard condenser does on axis, meaning the further you move away from axis on a pencil condenser, the more side rejection. But these are, again, a really, really cool tool. If you try to take 2 Apex 435Rs and put them side by side in front of acoustic guitar, it's pretty tough. Plus, they're very different diaphragms. Their surfaces are different. So let's unbox these babies too. Love the case. So there's a lot packed in this little box. So let's talk about it. So first of all, I got my microphones. So you'll see that they're a lot smaller. Oh boy, I'm going to be in big trouble for ripping this pack up. Okay, so first of all, this is a pencil condenser. You'll notice it's smaller than your other condenser mic that I showed you. A couple of cool things on it. Frequency roll off, so I can roll off 80 hertz straight off the hop. And also there's a 10 dB cut on the microphone, so I can cut down 10 dB because these things are uber sensitive. So a couple of reasons why this pack though is even more valuable than most is I can take this diaphragm off and change my pattern to another totally different diaphragm. So I've got two different mic tones by just simply unscrewing one of them and putting another one on. Now that's for different miking situations depending on how wide I want the pattern. Yeah, a very, very cool option in this bundle. Now of course they come two of them in it because the most common, aside from overheads for your drums, the most common use of them is this XY pattern in front of an acoustic guitar at a 90-degree angle. So you're picking up, somewhere near the 12th fret on one mic, and you're picking up the guitar hole with the other mic. Or maybe you're moving one up the neck so that you can pick up those cool neck tones of the sliding if you like that sound. But yeah, you can put one over your shoulder, which is where you hear the guitar from, and one at the 12th fret. So then you got those two tones to blend together to make a really incredible sound. Now, can you put one of these on a kick drum? Sure. You're not going to like the sound of it unless you like just the batter head or the ticky part of it. But yeah, it can definitely do the job. So having a dynamic for high sound pressure level tones, having a condenser to pick up nuanced tones, and having pencil condensers for some of the really articulate sounds that you want to record, piccolos, clarinets, flutes, again, acoustic guitars, anything that you think you want much more of a precise shot at, because these do not go far off axis, 10 to 15% maybe, where these guys on the front of the diaphragm, they'll give you up to 180-degree recording surface. Just one last thing, this comes with two shock mounts, by the way, which is really, really awesome, and a couple more of these dreaded foamies that we discouraged a few minutes ago. But heck of a pack, and sub $200. So, you could really build a heck of a mic locker for about $400. So, but yeah, having, there's not one size wrench, and wrenches don't knock in nails very well. So having a few extra tools in your toolbox really can change what you can do as far as your recording options. So, all right, so let me go through a question here from Peter. So Peter says, so a $100 USB interface device doesn't have the quality preamps of a dedicated mic preamp, and for basic guitar mix YouTube videos is okay, but for studio recording I need to take the dedicated mic preamp step. The best way to come down to this, Peter, is, and I'm putting Long McQuade on the spot here, but they have a return policy of 30 days. If you buy a preamp and you don't hear a difference of the sources that you're used to recording, you take it back. I think probably on this thread, you're going to get about 50 answers from people that own preamps, and they're going to say, yeah, Peter, you know what? Even if it's a tube MP, just try something, because clean gain is the #1 reason to get a pre. And then the tones of the preamp, whether it be that it's a tube product or whether it's got a compressor or an EQ or whatever into it that can shape those sounds. Having a preamp is next level stuff. I can tell you, I remember when I took the contract for Scholastic in the, gosh, it would be 12, 13 years ago. I remember the rider of things that they wanted that were, you had to have a vocal booth, you had to have a U87, you had to, a list of things, and preamp was right at the top of it, because they know that clean gain, mid-word editing is a pain in the butt for anybody that's trying to edit a book. So if it's, I was on my way to Toronto, and the next thing I knew, and I have to go and cut all that out of it, it's not good. So getting clean gain is definitely a nice addition. You got to have a preamp, or you got to have an interface either way. And yes, some will argue that conversion quality and quality of the preamps on the interface matter too. But the Focusrite 2i2, the USB dual pre PS, these things sell by the bucket load. And pandemic time, I swear if I could make them in my garage, I could be a millionaire selling them. And they're inexpensive, you know, under $200 to buy. And they're really enough for a lot of people. It's not until they experience the preamp difference that they say, yeah, you know what, I'm glad I bought a Focusrite, or I'm glad I bought an ART, because I at least started off with something good quality, and everything I add to it is good from there. So it's not like you have to trade in your interface now that you bought a preamp. You still got to get that signal to the computer. So yeah, it definitely makes a difference. And obviously the better quality ones you buy make a difference too. Let me reiterate, like I said from the beginning of the seminar, do you need that if you're just working by yourself? Well, that's up to you. If your hobby matters to you to say, yeah, you know what, I do want to improve what I'm capable of. You know, I own an Epiphone $300 guitar, and I really love it, and I learned how to play on that. And then I borrowed my friend's $3,000 Gibson, and my God, when I play it, I have an out-of-body experience. Well, that kind of thing is said by guitarists. I'm not a guitarist, so I only weep for them. But, you know, there's people with 10, 15 guitars, rightfully so. So they all have such subtle nuances in tone, but they all make a difference. So yeah, it's a nice addition. You don't even have to, like I said, get rid of your interface for that. So give it a try. Rent one, or I mean, to rent them is $10, I think, for a tube MP, something like that. Even less, maybe $4. But rent one and add it to your interface, and trust me, you will see a difference. Great question. All right, I'm going to put these guys back on the shelf because I'm a responsible retailer. All right, here we go. So we spent a good bit of time on preamps and spare microphones. Let's talk about some other things that you gotta have. So another thing that I get a lot of questions on is cables. Now, I worked for Best Buy for many years and sold monster cables, and you know, had a certain degree of belief in monster cables, mostly for terminations, because the minute I connected them, you can't undo them almost. They're so tough. But I do believe that cables make a difference. And I'll keep a long story short. I had a session one day where I needed to pick up a product that I needed a separate extension cable on the headphone amplifier. Now, when you're in the middle of a session and 4 people playing, and you added a headphone amp extension, you don't think about that when you're setting 4 people up. And everybody was happy except the 4th person, who said, you know what, I expected in a place like this that I wouldn't be getting any hiss on my headphone line. And I could not figure it out because it was the same looking kind of cable that I had for the rest of my headphone extensions. But because I bought something that was just dual strand, it had no type of isolation. All it did was just cross one AC power cable, and that was enough to give it a 60 cycle hum, and the artist was thrown off by it. So I probably saved myself $10 on the cable and cost myself return customers. They are good customers anyway, still are, but I mean, you know, that my point is that could happen to you. So I'm going to talk about cables, and I'm going to give this disclaimer. If you buy a decent quality cable, you're fine. This comes down to if you could hardwire everything that you own, meaning if I could take my mics and solder them to my preamps, I would do that, because then I wouldn't have to worry about a length of cable creating noise and hum and things like that. But you can't do that. So you got to have cables. I'm going to explain some differences in cables to you right now. And again, the fact that you got to have some of these lying around, because somebody's going to come with a darbuka and you're going to try and mic this thing up, and you'll realize it takes a dynamic and it takes a 90-degree angle to fit this thing properly. Anyway, you get my point. There's reasons for cables. I'm going to talk about 3 different types of actual, like, different connectors, and then I'm going to talk about 3 different levels of it, so you can understand why you wouldn't buy these cables. So first of all, I'm going to talk about 3 different connectors that you need to watch out for. So in the guitar pickup world, that be acoustic or electric, this is the right cable for you. If you take a close look at it, you will see, let me get my space here. There is, I'm sorry, I'm not doing a good job of that. And if I can get it into focus, there we are. So you can see there's one little stripe on this cable versus this cable, I'm going to pull up here, that has 2 stripes on it. This one right here is an unbalanced cable, or what we would consider a guitar patch cable. You cannot use a balanced cable on a guitar preamp because they just don't connect. There's nowhere for that third termination to go. So you would use this every time on a guitar or on an unbalanced signal. Now the thing about that cable is you don't really want to run it too long of a length. This one's a 15-footer. It's ideal for pretty much any type of setup, and even in a lot of small home studio setups where the cable runs are really short, an unbalanced cable will probably get you by. The problem is that you may also find yourself where you got to run power cables along the same lines, and you may get interference from them or even adjacent cables carrying signal. So an unbalanced cable to connect up your gear, probably not so much. I would use the balanced cable almost every time because it does have a third termination inside. I won't bother destroying this package to show you, but if you unscrew the stuff on the outside, you'll see a third termination inside. So, you've got your unbalanced cable for a guitar patch right here, and you got your balanced cable to connect all your other gear up. So that's just 2 different types of cables that look pretty much identical were it not because of the 2 stripes. And of course, this is your third cable here. This is your mic cable, most people refer to it as, or your XLR cable. Now you can see there's 3 pins on it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a balanced cable, because inside there might only be 2 wires. So you do want a balanced cable in virtually every scenario. You'll find that like a cable like this is somewhere in the $20–25 range, but you'll find some cables that are $10 or $15. And when you unscrew the tops, you'll see there's only 2 cables inside rather than 3. So that can be a bad thing in the sense that, again, you run an AC power cable across it, create a 60-cycle hum, and suddenly your experience is different. So I would always recommend a shielded cable, or I should say a balanced cable in the case of XLR connectors in your studio. What you want to do for live is up to you, but the same problems exist. Spend a few bucks extra, get the right cable. Now, I'm really going to mess with your mind here now and put these 2 cables back. We happen to have various styles of cable, and this is where it gets a little blurry for some people. I used to be of the camp that, copper's copper, they all do the same job, until I ran into that experience and had it explained to me by an engineer, not an audio engineer, but a mechanical engineer, why these things make a difference. So I'm going to explain them to you, but I think almost the best way to explain them is to show you what they say on the back. But I'm going to touch on it quickly first before I give you the kind of the technical play. So this is the standard cable that most people go with. This is, and it says standard right on it. We sell these by the millions of dollars a year because this is the basics that you need to hook up your studio. They come in various lengths, 5 foot, 15 foot, 25 foot, 50 foot. And for live, I'm speaking personally now, for live, this is all I use because they're reliable. They have a lifetime warranty. I can go to a local Long McQuade, say this cable's messed, they'll give me another one. I don't have to worry about it. So for live, because I wrap them and unwrap them, tie them and untie them, connect them and disconnect them, this is more than enough for me for the live world. And I love how robust they are. They're very durable. Now, when it comes to the studio, which the cables never move, you'd think I'd want something even more reliable. But that's not what the difference is in moving to the next line up. What the difference is that these are a multi-strand cable. So where this has, I think, 12 strands per line, this has something to the tune of 41 strands per line. And, 41's more than 12. No, the reality is that I have more cable to be able to send a signal through, a voltage signal through. So if I'm going to plug in a stove with 220, I notice my AC power cord is big and thick and creates less resistance for it. This has so many more strands to allow for less resistance. It also has what you call amphenol terminations. So these are a coated termination inside with high conductivity. So theoretically, they should give you, again, a slightly better tone. This is another animal altogether. Rather than being a 2-conductor product, this is a 4-conductor product. And 2 cables is better than 1, or 4 better than 2, if you want to have fun with it. But ideally, again, it's to improve the conductivity of these products. So because cables are just as important as a mic or anything else, the cleaner I can get that signal to run from point A to point B, the better off I am. Trust me, these at about 25, 30 bucks, 55 bucks, 75 bucks pales in comparison to snakes that I run that are $1,200. So you don't need that kind of thing in your home studio when you're getting your space first started. But when you start to get into having boxes where people can plug drum kits into and stuff, you might end up with that kind of cabling. But you have every possible answer you could have at every different level you could possibly have. And truly, I think you're just paying for peace of mind as you move up. Audibly, the difference is minute at best, but it's knowing that the components were built better, at better quality as you move up the line. I'm telling this to the whole world, but I'm going to tell you, this is more than enough cable for anybody. But if I'm making money, I'm probably going to something that I really can count on, that I know, even though they have a lifetime warranty too, they're not going to break. So I'm very comfortable if you move up to Deluxe, which is slightly more money, or you move up to 4-conductor studio product, you won't be unhappy anyway. Pardon me. So that's all I wanted you to know about cables, the different types of cables there were, and then the different quality levels of cable. Again, they all come in different lengths depending on what your setup is. And custom cabling is definitely a common fad in home studios now, but they, on a per foot basis, will often run you more money than these ones will. But sometimes you just need 11 feet, not 15 or 5. So that's it on cables. And the more you have of them, again, the better off you're going to be. You're not going to have to embarrass yourself when somebody brings in something unique and you don't have enough cables to cover it. All right, I hope you're still getting something out of this and you're still sticking with me, because we're getting pretty near the end. I got 3 more things. So spare cables was number 7. I now want to talk about mic stands, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but it's important to know that there are different mic stands, that some are meant for performance and some are meant for studio applications. Now the 2 I'm going to show you today are really performance mic stands. The idea with them is that I should have them kicking around. They sell for 40 bucks, 50 bucks, but you can't have enough of them. And I'm going to start off with your basic boom stand. If you have no other stand, you got to have a boom stand. I'm going to lay this on the table, I guess, is maybe the best way to show you. Real simple to use. It's a tripod stand in this base versus the round base I'm going to show you momentarily. The idea is that I'll make this a little easier, Matt, I guess. I'll just do it, I'm going to put it on the floor, man, just to make your life easy. And then I'll lift it up and show you what's going on. All right. So here I've got my gooseneck, and I got my boom arm, which is, again, totally telescopic, so I can move in closer to my source. If you're recording Neil Young, you're going to have one of these, because he records vocal and guitar at the same time. So you got to get him playing, and then a different mic here recording his acoustic guitar. So I've got on this back side a little tightener, so now this doesn't move. And then I've got my loosener here, so I can tilt them up, put them horizontal if I want to. So that is a necessary item. So this would be the first one that I would get for my studio, is a decent boom stand. Like I say, I think this one sells for about $46. So grab one and never live without it. However, there's a couple of scenarios that I run into often. Whenever I'm trying to record an acoustic guitar and I got a person sitting on a stool, that stand is often too high for me. So a stand like this that also offers me a telescopic neck, where I can move it left and right, getting closer to my artist. I even have another one that I can pull this out and make it go even further. Here, let me release that. Of course, I'm never going to get it out, but even take it a step further. So I can get real close to my acoustic guitar, be able to get into the space I want to mic. Now, we didn't talk about this whole lot because we talked about it more during Recording 101, but the idea is that miking is, and positioning is really paramount. If you got your headphones on and your artist is playing and you're not getting the right tone, to move a mic 15% off axis changes the tone totally, or closer or further changes it. So having different size mic stands for different miking applications is, again, really important. This one sells for about 25, 30 bucks. Pardon me. So, you know, really short bass on it. Probably looks like it's about 12 to 15 inches. And then your gooseneck on top, or your boom arm on top of it. So again, another handy product to have for the studio. Of course, on my Aston Shadow, I had just a straight up, you can see the bass on the bottom here, just a straight stand. And again, very handy for almost anything. Again, the stands sell for the $35 to $40 range, but having a couple of these kicking around for multiple uses. If it's an artist that, you know, steps up close to the microphone and wants to play a flute, then great. Microphone straight on a straight stand, good to go. Obviously in the studio you don't have people handling the stand while they're performing. So having a boom stand, having a short boom stand, having a straight stand, again, all less than 50 bucks. As many as you can buy over time, allows you your collaborative efforts to become a little easier to work with. So not a ton to say on stands. You can get small tabletop stands if you want to use them for talkback mic applications, or you know, again, really short scenarios, interview, podcasting, that type of thing. And they're only about yay tall, straight stands with a round base on them. So lots of options when it comes to stands. But again, I can't stress enough, the more stands you have, the easier it's going to be to record your application. So we all know that the more you record, the better you get at this stuff, and obviously people will want to work with you if you have these things to be able to record the products the way they expect. So that's your investment in the studio. These are the things you need. So we're almost there. I got two more things I want to talk about, and if you'll indulge me on this one, this one's a bit of a sales thing because these are brand new products that we just brought in. But I kind of brought them in based on consumer feedback. So in January, I went to NAMM, which is a trade show for people in the industry. And my customers had told me beforehand, you know what, I need a couple of really simple solutions for pop filters. Now, first of all, if you don't know what these are, the idea is that you put them in front of your microphone and they get rid of all the those types of sounds, which is a heavy displacement of air that the mic's not expecting. So this dissipates that air so that it doesn't make that horrible air sound in the microphone. So they just kind of take the sound, and although they let it through, they stop your windy noise from coming through. So outside, those foam coverings that one of the guys talked about earlier, those are actually pretty handy outside. Because it's hard to move a pop filter in front of a mobile situation. But I find in mobile, they're pretty handy. I should have brought that up, so sorry about that. But these are two new products that I want to talk about, and they're just, you know, just smart. I remember I was in a Long McQuade when the customer brought this up, and she said, you know, I hate how ugly these things are. So we brought one that's not ugly. It's actually quite attractive, and it's from Apex, called the MWS Pop. Sells for $24.99. And it's this simple. Here's the elastic bands. You take your microphone, and I really want to demonstrate this. So I'm going to take my 435 back out. And now it doesn't matter where the mic moves, if the you know, whether you're outside with a condenser or whether you're in a situation where you know, you don't have enough room on a mic stand, or you know, you just want this to be a clean application. You just take your microphone, and Matt, if I can get that overhead shot one more time. You just take your microphone and you slide it right into here, and it's on. So I'll show you. It's like that. So if you can give me the main shot again, I'm just turning this way, and my pop filter's already on. And all that it is the two elastic bands hold it in place, and it's about 6 inches from the diaphragm. So if I'm back, 6 inches. It's about an inch from the diaphragm. So if I stand back now from this, my normal distance, I'm going to get rid of all my plosives. So super handy, 25 bucks, and you know, really grateful to a customer who brought this up because I think this is going to sell sell a ton of them. Now, this is a relatively small, large diaphragm microphone. You can see on the end it's not that big, but it slides in there perfectly. So even larger ones, if I had to expand that elastic out, you can see the elastic stretch quite a way. So I can get some pretty big microphones in there. So again, super handy for that. But again, a must. You really need to have one for every microphone that's going to take a tone like that. Now, tubas, trombones, trumpets, anything that actually displaces air outside of it, or even, well, maybe, but if you want to stretch it to guitar amps that have burst tones that come off of the driver itself moving, although I've never used a pop filter for that I can think of, but that's another example. But anywhere that there's air movement that comes in the form of a plosive, you should have a pop filter. So let me put that away. Keep my store clean. And so that's one. That's super handy, inexpensive. But this is one that I thought was brilliant because admittedly I have probably 6 or 7 pop filters at home that I switch between, but I generally like to, and this is a personal preference thing. Let's unbox this one too, Matt. This is a personal preference thing, but I generally like to use steel or aluminum style pop filters. And the two reasons for that. Number one, they're easy to clean. In fact, you can just dump them dunk them in soap and water and then just dry them off or shake them and the water comes off. But you got to get that off so they don't rust. So I usually like those, but some people prefer cloth because they actually handle a plosive better. And some will debate this, and I believe it too. I'm sucked in that the cloth filters are a little bit darker than the steel filters. So in this bundle for 49 bucks, I just took everything out of the box here. That was the beautiful box. First of all, it comes with a gooseneck. So you just take that and mount that onto your mic stand and then bring the gooseneck up towards you. But this is what's brilliant. For 49 bucks, you get your choice of either a cloth pop filter, two stage cloth pop filter, and you also get a 2-stage metal pop filter. I'll see if I can show you these there. You can see it. You can start to see it's not even so much zoom, Matt, as it is, I tilt it and you can see the little swirls. So that's the metal one. And then this is the cloth one. Doesn't have any swirls in it. It's just straight up cloth. So I then just take my mount, and if I find the person that is performing is highly plosive, I'll put the cloth one on. I thread it on, I'm good to go. If this gets dirty and I need to clean it, or I find that my next artist has a darker voice and I want it to come through a little brighter, or I want something that I know this person's a smoker or whatever and I need to clean this, I put my metal one on. So heavy plosives, darker tone, a lot less heavy plosives, a little bit brighter tone, one gooseneck, super clean, so now you don't have to have 2 gooseneck products lying around. You just put on the one you want and they're totally interchangeable, 49 bucks. Pretty handy and a wicked recommendation. So I always listen to customers, and I'm sure there's people on this podcast that have contacted me either on cell or by email. So I'm totally approachable. If you got ideas that you think work, then I will definitely keep them in mind, because at least twice a year we get to do either whether it be meetings at NAMM or product meetings that we discuss new ideas. Those ideas often come from people in the market. So that's why I love these podcasts, because we get to hear more from you. So although I haven't seen a question in a while, so I'm feeling all right. So yeah, pop filters you got to have, and basically one for every vocal scenario for sure, and then other situations where you might have, again, a cloth one, a steel one, that type of thing. So very handy that it comes in one package in this case. So I'll just put that away, and that's number 9 of things you need in the studio. So we're down to the last one here. So if you got overall questions, now's the time to talk about them, because the last thing we're going to get through pretty quickly. So I'll put this back on the wall here. So let's talk about the last thing. And while this often comes up as a live situation, it's very, very handy to have these products in the studio as well. And that's splitters and DIs. So for example, in my studio, I have a live setup for those that like to record live off the floor. And to be able to do that, I need to send that feed to a few different places. One, I need to send to a live mixer, and the other one I need to send to the tracking mixer. So the live mixer gives them this ambiance on the floor, and the recording mixer, of course, is taken in the tone that I want. So being able to take a single signal and send it two different directions in the studio is important. So I'll have that very often with electric guitarists that need to go from their head to the cab to get the cab experience, and I can mic that. And then they also need to have the line of the red box or their head out to the recording mixer. So I get the best of both worlds, and the ability to reamp if I want to, or simply blend those two tones if I want to. So having splitters or direct boxes even to get me clean tones. Sometimes I got a buzz I just can't get rid of, and I need a Clean Box Pro that lets me clean up the signal regardless of how bad it comes from whatever my source is, so that I get a nice tone at the end. So there are dozens of utility boxes that we sell at ART through Yorkville, that you think of a scenario that could go wrong. Even if you think about my turntable, I need an RIAA preamp for my turntable, then I can get one of those from Yorkville that bypasses the I guess it's the licensing thing, and then gives me the amplification that I need. You think of a scenario that you could run into, there's a box for it. But today I wanted to bring up one product that I think everybody should own, and that's called the DTI. Now, this is the single biggest solution box that we sell at Yorkville. Sell over 1,000 of these a month, and they're pretty simple. The idea is that I've got two balanced inputs or two unbalanced inputs, and they go to two balanced or two unbalanced outputs. So I have an unbalanced signal I want to put in, converts it to a balanced signal going out. I got a balanced signal that goes in, I can convert it to an unbalanced signal going out. The point is that you're going to run into scenarios where you'll simply just need to have that type of scenario set up. These things clean up the tone, they protect it, they balance it, and again, you're just going to run into long cable runs sometimes that you just can't get around. And you have a snake. This is very common, where a snake terminates in one spot, but you need a run to go further on from the snake. So the DTI will convert from balanced to unbalanced signal to allow me to connect things like electric guitar into XLR inputs, things like that. So these are handy to have, under $100, and again, they're just those jackknife products that you kind of have to have when you're at the next level. So again, there's lots of these we could go through, but I think we've probably spent a good enough time in spending your money today and giving you a sense of what's next. So although I'm watching for questions, I don't see many, so I just want to kind of give you a bit of a wrap up here today and clarify something really, really important. When you bought your interface, your microphone, and your headphones, you were set. For you to do your work and create, I hope that during this pandemic time, you've done that, because we have sold mountain loads of all three of those things. We're sold out of most of it, and that's thanks to you, of course. But I believe that there's a lot of people out there recording now, whether they're doing voiceover or otherwise. So yeah, you've got it right, that you've really got all you need. And if I'm not here to tell you that you need to have more things. I love gear. I'm a gear hound. I have a room with spare gear. I could probably open a museum if I wanted to. But that's just me. I like gear. I like to test things. I like to build scenarios. But more than that, I never have a customer that says, oh, you know what, I was going to spend 2 hours in the studio and got pre-charged, the rate for those 2 hours, and then I spent 20 minutes because he didn't have a splitter box. That just never happens for me. And that's the difference of why I've always got at least 3 or 4 clients that are always on the ready, that have work, whether it's tracking work, mixing work, mastering work, whatever the case may be. There's always work because they don't get let down like that. So for you to stay in your world that you just got into with your headphones, microphone, and interface, you are good to go. It's the minute that you decide to collaborate or monetize what you're doing that involves other people that you need to start to look at some of these next step things. Now, I mean, getting a headphone amp for $100, you're never going to go wrong with that, even if you just want your sister to listen to what you're doing. Here, throw the headphones on. You don't have to take your headphones off to hand to her. It's just simple things like that that, people start to take you more seriously when you start to do this. Again, let me reiterate, it does not trump talent. If you are the world's most talented producer and you're working off of a laptop with just headphones, you still have everything you need. But most people that are in that scenario, they've had all the things that we just talked about today. And mixing's one thing, tracking's another. A lot of this stuff is dedicated to tracking, of course, but you got to get something recorded if you want to have something to mix, right? Jeffrey Keaton asked, do I need a DAW if I purchase an ART voice channel? The answer is yes, you're going to need a DAW for anything, but again, right into the Mac software or even in voice record software on a PC if it comes with it. If you have just that, then you'll be able to plug the voice channel in and you're done. Now, there's plenty of free DAWs out there, digital audio workstations like, not free Cubase, Pro Tools, Logic, but those are your most commonly known ones. But there's plenty of free DAWs out there that you can plug the voice channel in with. Audacity comes to mind. I think even Reaper has a free version. Certainly on, you can get Sonar Cakewalk free now from BandLab. So there's lots of free DAWs to get. And yes, you plug the voice channel into it and you're literally done. It's your interface too. All right. So I don't see any of your hands up, so I'm assuming that we're all good there. Matt, you feeling okay?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to say a couple last things in case there's more questions, and then we'll wrap it up. Again, I want to stress that talent means more to this process than anything. Gear doesn't make talent, but if you have talent, it's nice that they have gear that they can use that allows you to make that talent the best it possibly can be. I didn't introduce anything to you today that doesn't have an option under $100 aside from room treatment, but I'm sure there's a lot of DIY people out here that have made their own room treatment. I've seen it. You go to Fabricland and get your own velvet and put 1x2 strips together and then put your insulation on the inside, and there's your panels. Hang them up and away you go. I've seen people hang up moving blankets because they're nice and thick and put them 6 inches from the wall to allow the sound to die before it hits the hard surface and come back. There's so many great tricks, but all of these tips and things that you can do will improve on your recordings and ultimately make you more credible when you want to turn this into a viable money-making business. So I really hope you found today valuable. I know this was enjoyable for me. I've done so many of these that sometimes they're hard to get up for, but I love the response from L&M customers. And of course, you can always email me at Raymond Wilson. Let me change that. That's my own personal one. Let's go with rwilson@yorkville.com. And please do that. Of course, you'll see any email that comes back from me has my phone number on it as well. Use that sparingly, please. But I'm always here for the Canadian recording public, and I love to connect with you and love to hear your stories. So thanks for giving me the time you gave today. I really appreciate it. And as always, happy recording.